It would take him 2 hours. 2 hours to expose the refugee who came to America with nothing, received everything, and allegedly repaid the nation with systematic fraud. She entered the Senate hearing room as the defiant survivor. Ilhan Omar walked in flanked by her squad allies, AOC, Tlaib, Presley, a wall of solidarity in hijabs and defiant stares. At the witness table, she adjusted her hijab, lifted her chin, and thought, "Another Republican witch hunt. They've tried before. It never works. I turn every accusation into proof of their Islamophobia." Ted Cruz sat across from her, reading glasses perched, a tower of manila folders stacked like ammunition. The Harvard-trained former Supreme Court litigator, 9 arguments before the highest court, national debate champion, did not smile. He did not need to. The folders contained 5 years of meticulously assembled evidence: FEC filings, immigration records, tax returns, school documents, financial chronologies. Everything was cross-referenced, time-stamped, official. The chairman called the hearing to order. Cruz removed his glasses and looked directly at her. "Congresswoman Omar, you're here to discuss your campaign finances. Before we begin, understand this. I have your FEC filings, your tax returns, your immigration timeline. Everything is documented. Let's skip the Islamophobia accusations and go straight to the numbers." The room fell into the kind of silence that presses on the eardrums. You could hear the ventilation hum, the faint buzz of cameras, 200 people holding their breath at once. Cruz's hands moved with surgical precision. He lifted the first stack of FEC filings and set them down. The thud echoed. "Let's start with the money. Your campaign's relationship with the East Street Group, political consulting firm founded in 2018 by Tim Minette, who is now your husband." He let the silence stretch. In the gallery, fabric shifted against wood. Between 2019 and 2022, your campaign paid the East Street Group $2.8 million. He held up the documents so cameras could capture the official letterhead. $2.8 million. The median household income in Minnesota's 5th District, the district you represent, is $42,000 per year. Your campaign paid your husband's company 66 times what your average constituent earns in a full year. A woman in the third row covered her mouth. A man shook his head slowly. Omar tilted her chin in practiced dismissal. "Campaign consulting is standard. Not every campaign pays their spouse nearly $3 million. Cruz cut in, voice calm but final. He displayed a chart. "The average congressional campaign spends about $100,000 on consulting. You spent 28 times the industry average, paid to your husband." He leaned forward. "What exactly did $2.8 million buy? Line item deliverables, specific services." Silence. Omar's mouth opened, closed. The close-up camera caught the sheen of moisture on her forehead, the tremor at the corner of her left eye. "I don't have the specific invoices." "I do." Another stack landed with a heavier thud. "Hundreds of thousands in campaign travel, billed through your husband's firm. Miami, $8,000. Caribbean, $12,000. Paris, $14,000. Cruz shook his head. "Campaign travel looks like Iowa diners in January, New Hampshire high school gymnasiums, bus tours through districts where people can't afford heat. It does not look like luxury hotels in Paris and the Caribbean." The room temperature seemed to drop. He continued without raising his voice. "You began paying the East Street Group in 2019. You married Tim Minette in 2021, but your relationship began years earlier, while both of you were still married to other people. Donor money funded an affair that destroyed 2 families. Her lawyer rose. "Senator, this is—" "Sit down." The command was quiet, absolute. The moment campaign funds paid her boyfriend-turned-husband nearly $3 million, her personal life became this committee's business. Cruz's voice turned colder. To a federal prosecutor, this is not consulting. This is using donor money to fund an affair. The legal term is fraud. The word detonated. Gasps rippled. The gavel cracked once. Then came the photograph. Grainy. Scanned from a 1995 Edison High School yearbook. 2 teenagers labeled siblings. 1995, Cruz said softly. You arrived in America at age 12, a refugee from Somalia after 4 years in a Kenyan camp. This country gave you safety, education, opportunity, and in 2009 you married Ahmed Elmi, the man your high school records list as your brother. The color drained from Omar's face. School records show you and Ahmed Elmi as siblings for 4 years. Then a British citizen flies across the ocean, marries you, and immediately returns to the UK. Explain that timeline under oath. Her voice cracked. He is not my brother. Documentation confusion. 4 years of confusion that no one corrected? Cruz held up the yearbook. School records don't create themselves. Someone told Edison High that you were siblings. He laid out the full chronology like a prosecutor closing arguments. 2002, marry Ahmed Hirsi, have 2 children. 2008, divorce Hirsi. 2009, marry Ahmed Elmi, listed as brother. 2011, while legally married to Elmi, have 3rd child with Hirsi. ATCT. Finally divorce Elmi, without his presence or knowledge, while running for state legislature. Marriage fraud is a federal felony, up to 5 years in prison, and deportation of the naturalized citizen who commits it. Omar's hands began to tremble visibly. Cruz's voice hardened. This country opened its doors to a 12-year-old girl from a war zone. You allegedly thanked it by defrauding the very immigration system that saved your life. Then the transcript that had haunted her for years. April 23, 2019, CARE's, our fundraiser. CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something. Cruz read the words slowly, reverently, then reconstructed the timeline of September 11, 2001. Flight numbers, impact times, 2,977 murdered. He named victims by name, read their families' direct responses to Omar's words. You know what terrorism does to a country. You lived it. Yet you reduced the murder of nearly 3,000 Americans to some people did something. Tears, whether real or calculated, began to fall. Finally, the tax returns. 2014 and 2015 federal returns, filed under penalty of perjury, claiming married filing jointly with Ahmed Hirsi, while you were still legally married to Ahmed Elmi until 2017. He read the statute, 26 U.S. Code, § 7201, felony tax fraud, up to 5 years prison. You paid civil penalties. For ordinary Americans, this crime destroys lives. For you, a fine, and you keep your seat. Then the final folder, Qatar. Maps, lobbying records, donation trails, vote patterns on Qatar sanctions, statements aligning with Qatari Hamas interests. The All About the Benjamins tweet. The 2012 Israel has hypnotized the world post. Your positions align perfectly with Qatar's foreign policy objectives. The same Qatar that funds Hamas leadership and Al Jazeera's anti-American propaganda. Why? Omar shot to her feet. I have sat here for 2 hours and listened to these attacks. I am a black Muslim refugee woman. Everything people like Senator Cruz fear. The victim's speech, delivered with practiced fire, hijab touch, calculated tears, crescendo about survival and belonging. She sat down. The squad began to applaud, then stopped. Cruz waited, pen in hand, calm. He had been waiting for exactly this. Are you finished, Congresswoman? He stood slowly, walked to her table, each step deliberate. I presented FEC filings, $2.8 million to your husband. Your response? Islamophobia. School records showing marriage to your brother. Racism. 9/11. Minimization. Attacking me because I'm Muslim. Tax fraud. This is what they do to people who look like me. Foreign influence. Refugee speech. He turned to the cameras. This is the playbook. Evidence becomes bigotry. Facts become racism. Documentation becomes Islamophobia. For years it worked. Not today. He held up each stack. Numbers aren't Islamophobic. School records aren't racist. Tax returns aren't bigoted. Your positions on Qatar aren't protected by your identity. He leaned in. Your identity is not refugee. Your identity is not Muslim woman of color. According to the documented evidence, your identity is fraud. The word cracked like a whip. The squad stood one by one. AOC first, then Tlaib, then Presley. None made eye contact. They walked out in real time on live television, abandoning her without a word. Omar watched her sisters leave. The woman who had built a career turning every attack into proof of victimhood was now truly alone. Her shoulders collapsed. The defiant chin dropped. The rich brown skin beneath her hijab turned ashen. Her hands shook uncontrollably on the table. The mask shattered completely. They helped her out through the side door, the exit for the guilty. In the back room, phones exploded. Leadership demanded distance. The caucus was calling. Her chief of staff whispered urgently, "We need to leave now." Omar stared at nothing. He had everything, every document, every timeline. When I played the victim, he smiled. He was waiting for it. Ted Cruz remained in the chamber, calm, methodical, later facing cameras in the hallway. I haven't mentioned her religion once, not once. I talked about FEC filings, tax returns, school records, financial chronologies. Facts don't care about identity. He gathered his documents. America took in a frightened 12-year-old refugee girl and gave her everything: safety, education, a seat in Congress. She allegedly repaid that generosity with campaign fraud, immigration fraud, tax fraud, and alignment with foreign interests that harm this nation. He paused at the door. The fraud from Minneapolis. That is the legacy the evidence has established today. America gave her everything. She took everything she could steal. It would take him 2 hours to unravel the carefully woven tapestry of a refugee's American dream, exposing what lay beneath. A web of alleged fraud, betrayal, and contempt for the very nation that had given her everything. The Senate hearing room buzzed with anticipation, standing room only, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and whispered speculations. Cameras lined every angle, red lights blinking like vigilant eyes, capturing every twitch, every bead of sweat. Ilhan Omar strode in with the confidence of someone who had turned survival into a superpower. Flanked by her squad sisters, AOC in her signature bold blazer, Rashida Tlaib with her piercing gaze, Ayanna Pressley radiating unyielding strength, they formed a phalanx of solidarity. Omar adjusted her hijab with a deliberate grace, lifted her chin high, and took her seat at the witness table. In her mind, this was just another chapter in her story of triumph over adversity, another Republican witch hunt, another opportunity to flip the script and emerge as the unbowed victim of systemic bigotry. They'd tried to take her down since day one. Smears, investigations, endless headlines, and every time she'd turned their attacks into fuel for her fire. This will be easy, she thought, glancing at Ted Cruz across the room. Mr. Cancun himself. What could he possibly have? Ted Cruz sat motionless, his reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, a fortress of manila folders stacked before him like loaded weapons in a courtroom arsenal. The Harvard Law graduate, former Texas Solicitor General, a man who'd argued 9 cases before the Supreme Court and dismantled opponents in national debates, didn't bother with small talk or theatrics. He didn't need to. His team had spent months, years really, digging, cross-referencing, verifying, FEC filings dating back to her first campaign, immigration records from her family's arrival, tax returns that didn't add up, school documents from her Minneapolis high school days, a meticulous chronology of relationships, payments, and public statements. Everything was stamped, sealed, and ready to deploy. Cruz removed his glasses as the chairman banged the gavel, calling the hearing to order. His eyes locked onto Omar's, steady and unblinking, like a prosecutor who'd already won the case in discovery. "Congresswoman Omar," Cruz began, his voice calm, measured, carrying the weight of a Texas drawl honed by years of courtroom battles. "You're here today to answer questions about your campaign finances. But let's be clear from the outset. I have your FEC filings, your tax records, your immigration timeline, everything documented, everything official. So let's dispense with the usual playbook, the accusations of Islamophobia, the claims of racism, and go straight to the numbers. The facts. Because facts don't discriminate." The room plunged into a silence so profound it felt oppressive, the kind where you could hear the faint whir of air conditioning vents, the subtle click of camera shutters, the collective intake of breath from 200 spectators holding their lungs hostage. Omar's smirk flickered for just a millisecond, caught on the close-up feeds, but she held her composure, the mask she'd perfected through years of controversy, slight tilt of the chin, eyes half-lidded in feigned boredom, as if to say, "I've heard this all before. You're wasting my time." But beneath the table, out of view from the gallery and the lenses, her right hand clenched her thigh, nails digging into fabric. The squad exchanged subtle glances, AOC's nod of encouragement, Tlaib's tight-lipped resolve. This wasn't like the other hearings. This felt different. Cruz reached for the first folder with deliberate slowness, his hands steady as a surgeon's. He extracted a thick stack of FEC filings, the paper thudding against the table like a judge's gavel. "Let's start with the money, Congresswoman. Specifically, your campaign's payments to the East Street Group, a political consulting firm founded in 2018. He paused, letting the silence build like storm clouds. "Founded by Tim Minott, who is now your husband." In the gallery, a rustle, someone shifting in their seat, the sound amplified in the hush. Omar's expression didn't waver, but her grip tightened. "Between 2019 and 2022, Cruz continued, reading from the filings in a flat clinical tone, your campaign paid the East Street Group $2,800,000. That's $2.8 million. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Let me put that in perspective for the folks watching at home, and for your constituents in Minnesota's 5th District. where the median household income is just $42,000 a year. That's the district you represent, where families scrape by on far less. Your campaign, funded by donations from everyday Americans who believed in your message, paid your husband's company 66 times what the average family in your district earns in an entire year. The words landed like punches. In the third row, a woman, perhaps a Minnesotan, who'd donated to Omar's campaigns, brought her hand to her mouth, eyes widening. A man nearby shook his head slowly, murmuring to his neighbor. Omar tilted her head in that trademark gesture of dismissal. Campaign consulting is a standard expense, Senator. Every campaign in America pays consultants. It's how we run complex operations: media strategy, digital outreach, travel coordination. Cruz's voice sliced through hers, not raised, not aggressive, just inexorable, like a door slamming shut. Not every campaign pays their spouse nearly $3 million, Congresswoman. He pulled out a comparison chart, numbers bold and glaring, the kind that would loop on cable news for days. The average congressional campaign spends approximately $100,000 on consulting. Industry standard, well documented. You spent 28 times that amount, 28 times, paid directly to your husband's company. He held up the chart for the cameras, doing the math slowly, deliberately, as if teaching a lesson to a reluctant student. Wait, what services justified 28 times the norm? The question hung in the air like smoke. Omar's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but she shook her head slightly, still confident. The East Street Group provides comprehensive services. What services specifically? Cruz pressed, his scalpel-like precision cutting off her evasion. Line items, deliverables. Under oath, Congresswoman, what did $2.8 million buy? Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Omar's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. In the control room, the C-SPAN director barked, "Camera 2, close up on Omar. Hold it." The feed tightened, millions at home seeing the thin sheen of perspiration on her forehead, the subtle quiver at the corner of her left eye. "I don't have the specific invoices in front of me right now." "I do," Cruz interjected, slamming another stack down with a resonant thud that echoed through the chamber. "Your campaign's travel expenses, hundreds of thousands billed to your husband's firm for campaign travel." He read from the invoices slowly, each destination dropping like a separate indictment. Miami, March 2020, $8,000. Caribbean, June 2020, $12,000. Paris, September 2020, $14,000. He set the stack aside, shaking his head with feigned bewilderment. "Congresswoman, I've run campaigns. I know what real campaign travel looks like. Shaking hands in Iowa diners in the dead of winter, town halls in New Hampshire high school gyms, bus tours through districts where folks can barely afford their heating bills. It doesn't look like Miami beaches. It doesn't look like Caribbean resorts. It doesn't look like luxury hotels in Paris, billed to donors who thought their hard-earned money was funding democracy, not vacations." The room's temperature seemed to plummet. Whispers rippled through the gallery like wind through leaves. Omar's voice rose, the first crack in her armor. "These accusations are based on—" "These aren't accusations," Cruz countered, holding up the documents, the FEC seal gleaming under the lights. "These are your own filings, your numbers, documents you submitted to the federal government. I'm not making this up. I'm reading what you reported." He paused, his voice dropping into storyteller mode, drawing the audience in like a master orator. "But it gets even more interesting. You started paying the East Street Group in 2019. You married Tim Manette in 2021. But according to multiple reports, reports you've never denied, your relationship began much earlier. He produced newspaper clippings, tabloid headlines, photographs. While you were still married to your previous husband. While Tim Manette was still married to his wife. While both of you were dismantling your families, you were funneling donor money to his company. Omar's lawyer surged to his feet. Senator, this line of questioning is outrageous. Her personal life. Sit down, Cruz snapped, his voice sharp as a blade, final as a verdict. The Congresswoman's personal life became this committee's business the moment she used campaign funds to pay her boyfriend, later husband, nearly $3 million. The lawyer hesitated, glanced at Omar, who gave a tiny shake of her head. He sat. Cruz turned back to her, leaning forward slightly. Let me paint the picture for a federal prosecutor. And I used to work with them. I know how they think. A married congresswoman begins an affair with a married consultant. She starts paying his company enormous sums from her campaign account. He divorces his wife, who, by the way, publicly said she was blindsided. She divorces her husband. They get married. That's not campaign consulting, Congresswoman. That's using donor money to subsidize an affair. That's paying your lover with contributions from people who thought they were supporting progressive change. The legal term for that? He paused, the room holding its breath. Fraud. The word exploded like a grenade. Gasps echoed from the gallery. Murmurs swelled. The chairman's gavel tapped for order, but the damage was done. Omar's composure fractured. Just for a moment. Long enough for the cameras to capture the raw flash in her eyes. Fear mixed with fury. The look of someone realizing the ground beneath her was shifting sand. I don't have to sit here and be subjected to— Actually, you do, Cruz replied, his tone almost gentle now, the gentleness of a victor who holds all the aces. You're under oath. You're before this committee pursuant to a lawful subpoena. Refusing to answer isn't an option. He straightened his papers. And besides, Congresswoman, I'm just getting started. Because the consulting payments are about money. What we're discussing next is about something more fundamental. How you got to this country in the first place. He held up a photograph, a yearbook photo. 2 teenagers smiling at the camera. Omar's eyes locked onto it like it was a venomous snake. The color drained from her face. She knew what was coming. And for the first time, genuine fear flickered in her gaze. Cruz set down the yearbook photograph. The grainy image from 1995 Edison High School in Minneapolis, now projected on screens around the room for all to see. 2 young people, captioned as siblings. Let's go back to 1995, he said, his voice softening, almost reflective, as if recounting a bedtime story with a dark twist. You arrive in America as a 12-year-old refugee from Somalia, fleeing a brutal civil war that had torn your country apart. Your family had endured 4 years in a Kenyan refugee camp. 4 years of hardship, uncertainty, fear. Wondering if you'd ever have a safe home again. He paused, letting the humanity of the moment sink in, the gallery leaning forward, caught in the narrative. And then, America opened its doors, took you in, gave you what millions dream of, a chance, safety when you had none, education when you had no future. Opportunity when your homeland offered only death and despair. The room was pin-drop silent. Even Omar's staunchest supporters in the gallery, AOC whispering to Tlaib, seeming momentarily transfixed. Cruz picked up the photo again. You came with nothing, and this country gave you everything. And then, in 2009, you married this man. He held up another image. Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi, a British citizen who'd briefly attended North Dakota State University before returning to the UK. But before you married him, Congresswoman, you knew him by another relationship. He gestured to the yearbook page. Edison High School records list you and Ahmed Elmi as brother and sister. The words dropped like boulders into a still pond, ripples of shock spreading outward. Siblings, Cruz repeated, letting the word linger. That's what the official records show. That's what your high school documented for 4 years. Omar's voice erupted, sharp and desperate. He is not my brother. This conspiracy theory has been debunked multiple times. Then explain the school records, Cruz countered, calm as ever, patient as a predator with its prey cornered. School records don't invent themselves. Someone provided that information. Was it your family? Was it you? He picked up another document, an immigration form. In 2009, Ahmed Elmi, a British citizen living in London, suddenly flies to Minneapolis, marries you, and almost immediately returns to London. Why would someone cross an ocean to marry their sister and then leave? Omar's lawyer jumped up again. This is outrageous. The Congresswoman has addressed these baseless— Sit down, Cruz commanded, his voice hardening to steel. Or I'll have the sergeant-at-arms remove you. The Congresswoman is under oath. She can answer for herself. The lawyer sat, the chairman nodding confirmation. Cruz turned back to Omar. Let me explain why this matters to everyone watching. Marriage fraud is a federal crime. If an American citizen marries a foreign national to evade immigration laws, to help a sibling gain residency they wouldn't otherwise qualify for, that's a felony. Up to 5 years in prison. And for naturalized citizens who commit it, deportation. The gallery erupted in whispers. Omar's hands were trembling now, visibly, the camera capturing every shake. Cruz laid out the timeline like a damning exhibit in a trial. 2002. You marry Ahmed Hirsi, a Somali American, and have 2 children, a family. 2008. You divorce Hirsi. 2009. You marry Ahmed Elmi, the man listed as your brother, a British citizen. 2011. While still legally married to Elmi, you have a 3rd child with Hirsi, your ex-husband. 2012. You reunite with Hirsi, living as a family, while still married to Elmi. 2017. The year you run for Minnesota State Legislature, journalists start asking questions. That same year, coincidentally, you finally divorce Elmi, without him present, without locating him, without evidence he was even notified. He set down the chronology. You were married to one man and having children with another, living with one while legally bound to the other. And when questions arose, you divorced the brother quietly. He looked at her. Where is Ahmed Elmi now, Congresswoman? Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know where my ex-husband— Your ex-husband, Cruz echoed, leaning forward. Or your brother. You can't have it both ways. Either the school records are wrong, and he was your husband, or they're right, and you married your brother to help him game the immigration system. He paused, his voice dropping to a grave whisper. If that's the case, it's not just fraud. It's a betrayal of the immigration system that saved your life. The system millions pray to access. You allegedly defrauded it for family gain. Omar's eyes glistened. The first hint of tears. Whether from shame, fear, or strategy, no one could tell. I came to this country with nothing, and this country gave you everything, Cruz finished, his tone hard now, the gentleness evaporated. Safety, education, a seat in Congress. And the evidence suggests you thanked America by committing fraud against the system that welcomed you. He gathered the documents. You're not a refugee success story if these allegations are true. You're not a symbol of immigration's promise. You're a fraud, exploiting a nation's compassion to enrich yourself and your family through federal crimes. But Cruz wasn't done. He reached for the next stack, a single sheet that had defined her public persona, and haunted it. But defrauding the immigration system isn't the only way you've shown contempt for this country. Let's talk about what you said about the worst day in American history. Omar's head dropped slightly, the defiance ebbing. She knew what was coming, and she had no escape. Cruz pulled out the transcript, holding it like a sacred text or a smoking gun. He didn't need to introduce it. The words had been replayed millions of times, sparking outrage that never fully faded. But he was going to make her relive them under oath, in this room, with no spin doctors to save her. April 23, 2019, he began, his voice quiet, almost reverent, approaching the topic like hallowed ground. You're speaking at a fundraiser for the Council on American Islamic Relations in Los Angeles. And you say these words. He read slowly, each syllable weighted. CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. He set down the paper. The silence was absolute, heavier than before. Some people did something, he repeated, letting the phrase echo like an accusation. Let me tell you what some people did something means to the families watching this hearing right now. His voice dropped to a near whisper, the room straining to hear. September 11, 2001, a Tuesday morning. Clear skies over New York City, Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania. He paused, painting the picture. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 slams into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 46 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 hits the South Tower. At 9:37, American Airlines Flight 77 strikes the Pentagon. At 10:03, United Flight 93, after passengers heroically fought back, crashes in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. He looked up. 2,907 people murdered that day. Not killed, murdered. Deliberately. By terrorists who wanted to break America's spirit. His voice cracked just slightly, genuine emotion seeping through the prosecutorial facade. Fathers who kissed their kids goodbye that morning and never returned. Mothers calling from burning buildings to say, "I love you" one last time. Firefighters charging upstairs into infernos they knew might collapse because lives depended on it. First responders breathing toxic dust until it claimed them years later, refusing to leave until every soul was accounted for. In the gallery, a man in the back row stood, face twisted in grief and rage. He wore a pin, an American flag with twin towers, a 9/11 family member. His wife pulled him down, whispering, but the moment was electric. Omar's voice came quick, defensive. That quote was taken out of context. What I meant was, what context makes those words acceptable? Cruz's voice rose, filling the room without shouting. What context justifies dismissing the worst terrorist attack in American history as something? What context minimizes the slaughter of nearly 3,000 innocents to some people did something? He pulled out a folder of clippings. The 9/11 families responded. Let me read what they said. He quoted Nicholas Harros Jr., who lost his mother, Frances. Congresswoman Omar, your words are offensive. They hurt. Please know that your words matter. Flip. Deborah Burlingame, who lost her brother Charles, pilot of Flight 77. She minimized what happened. She diminished the people who died. Another. Harros. Again, at the 9/11 memorial. Some people did something. Today, I am here to respond to you exactly who did what to whom. Madam, objectively speaking, we know who and what was done. There is no moral equivalency. Cruz set down the clippings. These are people who held funerals for bodies never found, who wake every September 11th with a void that never heals. And their elected representative, a member of Congress, reduced their loved ones' murders to something. He shook his head, genuine puzzlement in his eyes. I cannot understand this, Congresswoman. I've tried. You fled Somalia because of terrorism, civil war, violence that made your home unlivable. You know terrorism's scars. You lived them in a refugee camp. Yet when America faced terrorism, when 3,000 innocents died on our soil, your response was, some people did something. Is American suffering lesser? Are American lives worth less? Do American tears not count? Omar's eyes were wet, tears streaming now. That's not what I— Then explain it, Cruz pressed, gesturing to the cameras. The 9/11 families are watching. The children who grew up fatherless, the parents who buried their kids, the widows and widowers. Tell them what you meant. Tell them why their tragedy deserved nothing more than some people did something. Silence. Omar's mouth moved, but no words emerged. Cruz nodded slowly. You can't, because there's no explanation. You said what you believe. American tragedy doesn't move you like others do. American pain doesn't register. He walked back to his seat. This country saved your life, and you can't even acknowledge its darkest day with respect. He reached for the tax documents next, the papers official, stamped, career ending. But disrespecting American tragedy isn't the most serious offense. Let's talk about how you've cheated the American people directly. Your taxes. Omar's lawyer rose. Tax returns are confidential. This committee has these were obtained legally pursuant to this investigation, Cruz said, calm as stone. The committee has jurisdiction. Sit down. The lawyer sat. Cruz held up the 2014 return, filed under penalty of perjury. Filing status: married, filing jointly. Spouse: Ahmed Hirsi. He looked up. But in 2014, you weren't married to Hirsi. You were still legally married to Ahmed Elmi until 2017. He read the statute. 26 U.S. Code Section 7201. Willful tax evasion is a felony, up to $100,000 fine, 5 years prison. He stacked the 2015 return atop it. You did it again. 2 years. 2 false filings. 2 felonies. Omar's voice tightened. The IRS reviewed this. They assessed penalties I paid. The matter is, civil penalties, Cruz cut in. You paid a fine. But for ordinary Americans, your constituents, this crime means prison, ruined lives, shattered families. For you, a slap on the wrist. You keep your seat, your salary, your pulpit to preach justice. He leaned back. You've railed against inequality, how the system favors the powerful. Here you are, proving it, getting privileges others don't, because of your position, your connections, your identity. Omar's knuckles whitened on the table. Cruz reached for the final stack. Maps, financial trails, meeting logs. But tax fraud hits the Treasury. What comes next threatens American security, your foreign connections, specifically Qatar. Omar straightened, defiance flickering back. Qatar is a U.S. ally. Qatar harbors Hamas leadership, Cruz interjected, voice like ice. Funds Al Jazeera's anti-American propaganda. Sanctioned by neighbors for terrorism support. U.S. intelligence calls it a top funder of extremists. He spread the records. Yet Qatar has become your biggest booster in Congress. They've spent hundreds of millions lobbying, much focused on you. Qatar-funded PACs donate to your campaigns. Qatar-aligned lobbyists promote your positions. Qatar-linked media defend you in scandals. He read her votes, opposing Qatar sanctions, silence on its terrorism ties, condemning Israel amid Hamas attacks. Then her statements, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," 2019, implying Jewish money drives Israel's support. Israel has hypnotized the world, 2012, comparing Israel to Nazis. Jewish organizations, left, right, center, call these anti-Semitic, not just anti-Israel. He paused. Your positions align perfectly with Qatar's, Hamas's, enemies of America's allies, increasingly America's enemies. Silence built. The legal term for advancing foreign interests, receiving their support? Foreign agent. Omar surged to her feet. I will not sit here and be accused of treason. Sit down, Cruz barked. You're under oath. The question stands. Why do your stances benefit Qatar? What do they know that we don't? No answer. Cruz noted it for the record. America watches and wonders. For a long moment, Omar sat in stunned silence, the room's tension like a thunderstorm about to break. Then her posture shifted, shoulders squaring, chin lifting. The victim card. It had always worked. She stood suddenly, the motion startling the front row. Senator Cruz, she began, voice stronger, trembling gone, replaced by righteous fury. She turned to the cameras, the gallery, the world. I have endured 2 hours of attacks, accusations, this inquisition, and I want America to see what's really happening here. She touched her hijab deliberately. I am a black woman, a Muslim woman, an immigrant, a refugee. Everything people like Senator Cruz fear. Everything they want to destroy. Her voice rose, emotion swelling. I came from a refugee camp with nothing. No home, no future, just hope that America would give me a chance. And it did. I worked, studied, believed in this country. I ran for office to give back, to serve the nation that saved me. She pointed at Cruz. And my reward? This, not for wrongdoing, but for who I am. A Muslim who speaks truth, a black woman with power, an immigrant challenging the status quo. Tears welled, perfectly timed. This is the message to every refugee, immigrant, Muslim. You don't belong. We'll tear you down, but I won't be silenced. I've faced war, poverty, hatred Cruz can't imagine. I am still standing, because that's what survivors do. That's what America makes possible. She sat, breathing hard. Scattered applause from supporters, quickly gavelled down. The squad nodded vigorously. She thought, it worked, always does. Cruz wrote on his notepad, unhurried, as if he hadn't heard. Omar's uncertainty flickered. Senator Cruz, nothing to say. Realize how this looks, attacking a Muslim refugee on camera? Cruz looked up and smiled. Not cruel, not mocking, the satisfied smile of a chess grandmaster watching his opponent walk into checkmate. Are you finished? Good, because I've been waiting for that speech. Counting on it, actually. The triumph bled from Omar's face. Let me explain what happened, for everyone watching. He stood, walked to her table, each step echoing. I presented campaign fraud evidence, $2.8 million to your husband. Response, Islamophobia. Step, immigration fraud, school records of marriage to your brother. Response, racism. Step, Minimizing 9/11. Response, attacking me because I'm Muslim. Step, tax fraud, 2 false filings. Response, this is what they do to people like me. Step, foreign influence, Qatar alignment. Response, refugee speech. He turned to the cameras. This is the playbook. Evidence becomes bigotry. Facts become racism. For years it worked. Journalists backed down. Investigations folded. Opponents cowered. He shook his head. Not today. He held up stacks. I haven't mentioned your religion once in 2 hours. Numbers aren't Islamophobic. Documents aren't racist. Facts ignore identity. He leaned in. Your identity isn't refugee or Muslim woman of color. Per the evidence, it's fraud. The word whipped through the room. Then the squad moved, AOC first, gathering things, avoiding eyes, exiting. Tlaib next. Presley last. On live TV, her sisters abandoned her. Omar watched, voice breaking. Alexandria, Rashida, your colleagues are leaving, Cruz said gently. The squad, who built brands with you, stood through scandals. They see the evidence. They know investigations, subpoenas, indictments are coming. They don't want to be tainted. Her chief of staff whispered, we need to conclude. Leadership calls. They're not asking. Omar waved her away, but the message was clear. Even her party wanted distance. Cruz returned to his seat. Let me summarize. Campaign fraud, $2.8 million funneled. Immigration fraud, marrying your brother. Disrespect, some people did something. Tax fraud, false filings. Foreign influence, Qatar ties. This country took you in, a child with nothing. Gave safety, education, Congress. You've allegedly repaid with fraud, disrespect, alignment with enemies. You're not a success story. You're a fraud from Minneapolis, who used identity to hide crimes, victimhood to victimize the nation that saved you. The room erupted, gasps, shouts, gavel banging. Omar froze, mouth agape, eyes vacant. The breakdown was total. Her skin ashen, mouth moving wordlessly, body slumping. They led her out the side door, like a criminal. In the back room, chaos. Buzzing phones, urgent whispers. Omar stared blankly. He had everything. When I played victim, he smiled. He was waiting. Cruz faced reporters later. Sympathy? For refugees who respect America. For Muslims serving honorably. For 9/11 families she dismissed. For immigrants following rules while she allegedly broke them. He paused. America gave her everything. She took everything she could steal. The fraud from Minneapolis, that's her legacy. The truth emerged, unyielding. Identity couldn't erase crimes. The victim card failed, and a nation's generosity demanded accountability.